Love is nothing short of complex. It's an intricate concept with multiple meanings, shaped by different social and cultural values. Yet despite that, we possess an inherent yearn for the fulfillment of such complicated emotion that can possibly be measured objectively. Possibly a consequence of the medium's infancy, video games haven't explored much of the theme's potential, cutting it short at love itself being the end goal. A prize to be won for the challenge. It's simple, and yet it makes sense. As a species, we don't have much going on besides procreating and proliferating. So proving your worth by and to getting a partner is a clear goal that everyone can immediately understand. In recent years, the dynamic of parent-child has become a sort of recurring trope, especially in AAA games. The most notable titles being God of War, The Last of Us, and even The Witcher 3 to some extent. But what about the in-between those two states? While parental love still holds narrative potential, what I'm trying to get at is the romantic relationship as the main drive for the story, and not its conclusion. If you ever scrolled through any sort of list for the best of all time, you'll be hard-pressed to name more than a handful of games that even come close to the use of such themes. For the sake of a coherent topic, let's leave speculation out of the table, otherwise the argument falls apart. Take Super Mario for example. The game happens because the protagonist is rescuing the princess, so one would instantly assume that she is the love interest to the plumber man. This becomes even more blatant to the latest entry of the series, where the concept of marriage plays an important role in the little that is of the story. Yet she rejects both the protagonist and the antagonist in the end as a playful, light-hearted joke. Which isn't very surprising. Spin-offs aside, you're barely given any time or reason as to why you're even chasing this broad throughout the universe. To keep it short, it's a hard line to draw between a company trying their hardest to never pass the romantic threshold into whatever suggestive content that might entail, and fans strapping themselves to the slightest hint of interaction between characters to mean that they are having the biggest hardcore sex just outside of the screen. For another example with an older audience in mind, Mass Effect suffers from a slight different problem, where you have several different options for partners, but besides the initial courtship and resulting sexual interaction, the relationship is basically over, with the characters acting like nothing ever happened past that. Shepard boning an alien or two doesn't make him save humanity harder, and that in itself is a massive waste of opportunity. Catherine is probably the only one who tackles romance in such a way, and while that is certainly commendable, the fusion between story and gameplay doesn't take advantage of its themes. Meaning you're still gonna be sliding blocks to save your ass, no matter who you want to smash. There is also the question of visual novels, but my knowledge in the topic is severely limited, and some people might not accept those examples because they aren't real video games. With all of that in mind, I believe that despite what some might consider an unremarkable action game, Pandora's Tower is still worth playing to this day. Developed by Gambarion, their only notable work between the sea of licensed One Piece games is Jump Ultimate Stars, which to this day is still the best Smash clone. Some would even say that this is the best licensed game ever, and that they should follow up on it. But nope, better churn out another mediocre 3D arena fighting game. It started as a Japan exclusive, but it would eventually come out in Europe, and later be included in the fan campaign Operation Rainfall, in hopes of trying to bring it to North America, together with Xenoblade Chronicles and The Last Story. While it's pure speculation on my part, I can trace several connections to some of its inspirations by considering the time frame of its development. So if anything here interests you, feel free to try it out for yourself before spoiling the experience. For everyone else, it is an in-depth look into Pandora's Tower. The game opens up with Aaron and Elena, two lovers escaping the city after an accident somehow incriminates both, forcing them to run away, together with a mysterious old lady named Mavda. After a long journey, they reach the 13 towers, where they might find a way to cure the curse that is slowly turning Elena into a monster. Using a nearby observatory as a temporary home, Heron is given the Oraculous Chain by Mabda and tasked with obtaining beast flesh from those who reside inside the towers, a crucial step for the ceremony to return Elena to her old self. After a short tutorial, Heron uses the chain to tear into a beast, rushing right back to offer it to Elena, which Mabda then explains how it must be consumed in order to stop the curse. As if eating raw meat wasn't problem enough, it's revealed how citizens of Illyria, those under Io's beliefs, are forbidden from eating meat of any kind, leaving Elena to either forfeit her life to the curse or go against the beliefs that have been a part of her since birth. Fearing a fate cut short from Heron, she forces herself to eat the piece of beast, which quickly has her regain her natural form, despite the sudden pain sending her into slumber. After waking up to her normal self, the celebrations are cut short, as Mabda explains how the curse is far from being lifted, and that if she wants to be completely free of it, she will need to consume the flesh from the masters of each tower, as the more common flesh can only be used to temporarily revert the curse. Suspended over the infinite void, aptly named the Scar, Heron has to traverse the massive fortress that holds the 13 towers in a race against time to save Elena from a fate worse than death. For help, Mabda has the Oraculous Chain bound to Heron and Elena so that its power grows with their bond, while simultaneously being able to keep track of Elena's curse. From this point onward, the game takes on its standard format, controlling Heron through each individual tower, exploring and fighting her way to the top with limited time. This creates a unique gameplay blend by borrowing from the concept of a traditional relationship structure, where one has the role of the provider, while the other supports with the daily living arrangements. This has further implications when considering one's health problems, forcing the better half to carry a heavier burden, which might alter a sign of goodwill into being perceived as an obligation, until the resulting outcome is all but good. The ever-present chains then take on a double meaning to this romantic theme, both symbolizing the precious link between the two people, but also being chained down to the responsibility that entails. While Pandora's Tower already has its fair share of bad endings, I like to consider Silent Hill 2 to be the best example as the logical conclusion to this type of scenario. Of course, the tone is still pretty romanticized. The game is rated for teens after all, so besides certain implications, there isn't anything overly shocking. If anything, Elena changes her mind real fast when it comes to eating meat, getting a bit too much into it in later chapters. For the action part, one would assume that there are 13 different levels, each for every tower present, but it's not entirely like that. Based on Wuxing, a Chinese philosophy which divides the world into 5 basic agents, you get a tower for each one, which is then doubled by use of the yin and yang motif, as the first 5 towers are based on masculine traits, and the other 5 take on the female form, diving deeper into the themes of romantic relation and how the 2 distinct counterparts make a complete whole. The remaining towers are a special case, so I'll leave that to a later part. Maybe as a reaction to how popular games were striving to be more realistic, with their often monotone and desaturated look, the tower interiors are just completely splashed with random color lights, which certainly gives it an interesting look. Where do any of these lights come from, I don't know, but I like it, even if I'm fully aware of how some building blocks are reused multiple times across the different towers. If it wasn't clear by now, the chain is the main focus of the action, both for the combat and the exploration, and it's used by pointing the Wiimote and holding a button to aim, which zooms in and slows down time, a necessity for bosses where quick action is required. When you chain something, if you pull in the opposite direction or press the dedicated button, you'll start putting force into it, allowing you to deal damage accordingly to how much you can feel the meter. This will have you gamble, as doing so will limit your movement and leave you open to attacks, in exchange for a powerful maxed out chain attack. There's a lot more you can do with it too, like swinging enemies around, chaining enemies into objects or each other, using it as a grappling hook both to pull yourself somewhere or something towards you, plus some extra techniques like timing the chain attacks to the small radical to unleash several attacks on a row, but I found little use to it besides some specific enemies that mostly require it. As for the bosses, they're all designed to be defeated with just the chains, so better learn how to use it effectively. Some are definitely more fun to fight than others, but I have to admit that all of their designs are great, with a blend of organic and metallic reminding me of a certain Capcom classic. You can also get different weapons besides the starting sword, those being a pair of twin blades and a scythe. Pretty unique selection, but even then, there is a lot to be desired out of the combat. All of the bosses are just puzzles to be solved with the chain, which doesn't need to be upgraded to do the necessary damage, so at least that relieves some of the pressure of getting stuck because you're not at the right level at the right time. The weapons are then relegated tools to dispatch the common enemies, which can also be killed with the chain either way, so they really are just an easier way to crowd control, especially with the scythe. But check this out! Can get a fucking pile bunker. Fuck yeah, pile bunker. Sorry babe, can't come back right now. I'm blasting a metal stake at maximum fucking velocity. BAM! The thing is, you can upgrade your weapons to unlock further moves, but those are just heavier levels of their charge attack. So it's not like there's much mechanical depth here. You just charge your attacks to the max and then time one button press for each charge level to continue the automatic combo. At least you don't have to mash, so that's good. It's also an interesting choice to be able to choose any individual step of the upgrade as long as you have the materials, with each new charge level locked behind the number of total upgrades. The problem here is that you only know which materials are needed if you actually encounter them before, which wouldn't be so bad if some of the necessary items weren't exclusive to certain towers at specific times. Besides some random documents alluding to this, there isn't any further hints. Plus there are secret items that you can only see if you zoom in with the chain attack. So once you know about this, you start not to act paranoid and scan every suspicious corner. Luckily, I'm here to tell you that you can get an accessory that lets you see those items normally, and even then, they aren't really worth the trouble anyway. After defeating each master, you would automatically go back to the observatory, so at least there's no backtracking involved. During our stay, the curse doesn't progress, so the game turns into a relaxing dating simulator of sorts. This is more obvious when interacting with Elena, who takes centerfold of the screen and gets really up close and personal at times, just like what any sort of layman would describe one of those visual novels to be. Depending on current events, you're able to interact with her in a couple of different ways, such as asking her about specific topics, or talk about any items that you might have gifted her. You can also have her translate documents which either expand the story of the world or give you crafting recipes, so be sure to read those. The observatory also gets comfier as you gift certain household items that can be used to personalize the living space, some even playing a short but sweet cutscene between Aaron and Elena. There are also times when during our quest through the towers, a cutscene will play showing how Elena is doing, which furthers the bond between the two as the narrative progresses. I just love how when you're around her, you have a specific button that just snaps the camera to her location, in case you need to know exactly where she is. Mabda also lives in the observatory, and she works as the only merchant in the game, not only for buying and selling items, but also to craft new ones and to upgrade their weapons. Plus, for every translated book, Mabda will pay you some good money, so the game actually rewards you for getting those, even if you never end up reading them. She provides a pleasant contrast to Aaron and Elena's dynamic, as she is the one providing to her skeleton husband, who just hangs inside a pot in her back. She is also a great way to complement the traditional family setting, as it was common for young couples to be living with one's parents while building their own living arrangements. While the story is about the relationship between Aaron and Elena, Aaron isn't much more than a vehicle for the player, only expressing itself as a character during rare important moments in the story, mostly leaving space for the player to insert into the role and build a closer personal attachment to Elena. While the game is designed around being able to return from the adventure at any time, it is certainly possible to complete each tower in one run. Later towers are certainly more complex, but you always have more than enough time to do it, so it's nothing impossible. In a way, it reminds me of Persona 5, and how you can also complete the dungeons in one day if you were skilled enough at managing your resources. The limited inventory space certainly supports this sort of design, especially in the beginning where you're most inclined to grab everything you see because you don't know what could be useful in the future. It is possible to expand the inventory by gifting specific items to Elena, but what the game fails to mention is that each item can only be used once, so you'll only be disappointed if you spend your hard-earned money in several copies of the same item. And yes, while there are RPGs where money becomes trivial at some point, this is certainly not the case. You'll be managing your budget till the credits and beyond if you plan on seeing the best ending, because Elena is nothing short than an expensive bitch, and she'll be needing at least 5 rings on each finger, and every other type of jewelry that you can put your hands on. At the same time, you don't have much time to grind like other RPGs, as the longer you out in the towers and the closer you get to Elena's limit, the more grotesque she will become, to the point where she'll retreat to the basement to hide, until she completely loses her mind and puts an end to both. One great detail is if you let Elena's transformation go too far, you might find some of the trinkets you gifted her laying on the floor, now broken after she lost control. Watching your actions have direct consequences on the person you are trying to save adds to the psychological effect that further incentivizes to take breaks from exploration and spend more time with your loved one. A piece of advice that is often forgotten and that some people should take closer to heart. Over the course of the game, past events are revealed through natural exposition and documents scavenged both in the observatory and in the towers, covering such general topics like why the towers were built and what is the scar, to more personal events like how Aaron met Elena. Each time you feed Elena a piece of the Masters, she will have a vision that tells the story of a couple living through a war-ridden world, plagued by famine and misery. Yet despite that, they live happily day by day, together with their young son, who gets accidentally trampled by an army parade. Around the same time, the people of Illyria and the Vestra decided that if they pulled all of their 12 gods into physical forms, maybe they could stop the war, with an additional vessel to provide balance between them. Feeling firsthand the effects of the war, the couple decides to offer themselves to be the sacrifice to this experiment, which unsurprisingly goes terribly wrong, as the balance is broken by the woman unknowingly being pregnant. The husband and the newborn child are rescued, but she turns into a monster who wants nothing more than to be reunited with her husband, which curses his whole lineage before she gets sealed in with the Masters, as the Vestra close down the entire project with the power of their chains. Even then, she was still so salty about the whole ordeal that everyone who got close to her descendants ended up being afflicted by the curse, with the final reveal being how the couple are the Aaron's ancestors, and that's why Elena got caught in this predicament. Mabda later explains how their people have been bringing those affected to the towers in hopes of this whole thing resolving itself, which was proving to be difficult until it actually got worse when 50 years ago the Hellenian army just decided to use the tower's masters as living weapons, causing the world to open up into what is now known as the Scar, a portal to some other horrible dimension. I have to say, the main plot being so tightly woven into the world's history is kinda overwhelming and could have been better handled. All of these nations and conflicts are thrown around without so much of a map to internalize this fictional world through its different time periods, strewn about side content like random dialogue and hidden documents for the player to piece together. They are trying to justify the whole situation on how humans are ultimately flawed and conflict is inevitable, but I kinda wish they focused more on the past relationship between Aaron and Elena. It's like it's trying to be Final Fantasy XII, but you are Bon, stuck on a dungeon reading about everything else that is happening in the world. What is also weird is the progression structure. In total, it has 5 unique endings, not counting the gruesome ending that occurs should you ignore Elena's hunger. Reinforcing the relationship theme, the requirements for each ending are based on how strong you cultivate your bond with Elena, with the first one being the lowest it can go, but only when you deliver the 9th piece of Master Flash, in which during a particular rough episode, Elena passes the point of no return, leaving you with an inescapable choice, reminiscent of a certain solid moment. The game then throws you right before the same cutscene, playing mostly the same, but before things escalate again, Mabda manages to subdue the situation, and you're able to continue your quest as normal. This was really confusing, because the game asks you if you want to save after the game over, so for a moment it seems like you're soft-locked into this dreadful situation. After that hurdle, you get to the last 2 towers, Dawn and Dusk, which require you to traverse them both at the same time, by jumping through interconnected portals. Arriving at the top, the boss reveals to be just a half of a complete fight, with both towers coming together at the end, where you have to use their own power against them. Shall your bond with Elena be too low after defeating these two, you are locked into one of the endings where you fight a premature final boss, only for Aaron to be forced by the army to use his control over her to unite the world under their oppressive power. After getting your first ending, you unlock the Chapter Select, which is honestly a strange solution to the problem of having multiple endings. You still have the ability to load into a saved file, but you can also select specific key points in the story to jump back into while still maintaining your current stats and equipment. The true problem is how the latest point you can jump into is the beginning of the last 2 towers, so have fun playing through those again. At least you finally unlock the option to buy the key that opens all of those red doors throughout the towers, with all of them giving you some great rewards for yourself and Elena. One of them is the previously mentioned Piled Bunker, but you can also get dresses, which she actually wears, so at least there's good enough reason to keep playing further. Again, if you want the best outcome, you'll need all the gifts you can get, as while you don't need to fill the affinity meter to the top, it still takes a lot of affection to achieve the one true ending. After all of the struggle, you defeat the last twin towers once more, and you're finally at the real final boss, with the only ending differences being after defeating her, so get to it. Pretty amusing how the boss just acts all sassy if the affinity is the lowest by this point, with Elena now just being used as a vessel. After defeating Aaron's ancestor, who turned into the monstrous 13th Master, you either have Elena being stuck as the host, with her ultimately sacrificing herself to seal everything into the scar, Aaron choosing to sacrifice himself together with Elena, or both surviving as the literal power of love purges the curse away, all while Mabda sacrifices herself to seal the land back to what it once was with the power of the renewed miraculous chain. So, what does this say about relationships that are based on effort being unfairly tipped towards one of the sides? While completely unrealistic, I have come to appreciate the positive ending note as hope always being worth fighting for, no matter how bleak the world might turn out to be. If there's anything bad to say about the game, it is the music, which is solely composed around classical pieces. That isn't inherently bad. I will always be down to fork to some Moonlight Sonata, as my man Ludman B never disappoints, but the tracks used here repeat way too often. What is baffling is how the director said that they considered composing an original soundtrack, but felt that it might not appeal to a worldwide audience to have music which was too powerful. What the fuck does that even mean? Another topic is the English voice acting, that while perfectly fine, the approach to the theme and its mannerisms don't translate very well to the English spoken language, obviously held down by its Japanese roots. Meaning that this shit is anime as fuck, so they could just include the original voiceover, regardless of changes to the names. Unfortunately, Pandora's Tower is still chained down to the Wii and the Wii U, and while the option for the classic controller is available, and so a modern port shouldn't be too difficult, the game is tuned to the Wiimote. For an example, it's like playing Trauma Center between the DS and the Wii. You can do it, it just doesn't feel as intuitive. But if The World Ends With You got a modern port with 2 audible control schemes, so can Pandora's Tower. If there is something that could certainly improve from a modern release, is the frame rate, cause the Wii can't handle any of this, even at its native low resolution. Moreover, both North American releases have known problems with the game randomly freezing in the last 2 towers, so if you're thinking of getting into this and you have a choice, go with the European version. Interesting use of motion controls aside, it's rare for games to actually tackle an ongoing romantic relationship and not just using it as an end goal. And for that, I can look beyond some of its caveats and give it a definite recommendation for all of those interested in this underrated title.